After 2 weeks of decreased fighting intensity, Russian forces on the eve of talks with Trump went on the offensive across the Donbas front. This offensive was mostly focused on the Kurakhove salient, Novosilka, as well as Toretsk and Chasiv Yar. Of these sectors, the most dangerous for Ukraine is the post-Kurakhove sector, where a cauldron that has lasted for weeks has finally closed on the defending Ukrainian troops. As you will see from this report, gathered from both Russian and Ukrainian sources, the pro-Ukrainian sources admit the unfolding disaster, but in as rosy words as possible. Now, while doing my research for this video, I stumbled upon a very insightful, and I must admit, fairly realistic assessment from RUSI, the UK think tank. The report was about the tactical developments during the third year of the Russo-Ukrainian War. It's quite a long read, but I have pulled out the most interesting parts in this video, and here is a snippet. The strategic objective of the Russian Federation remains the political subjugation of Ukraine by forcing Kiev to capitulate through military force. And immediately I note that this narrative is different from the Western narrative that Russia wants to subjugate Ukraine militarily. In pursuit of this objective, the armed forces of the Russian Federation are currently pursuing the destruction of the armed forces of Ukraine through a firepower-intensive attritional fight over critical terrain in Donetsk Oblast as their main effort. Again, this aligns with the Russian sources, which always said that Russia's main goal was demilitarization of Ukraine and not territorial advances. Simultaneously, the report reads, Ukraine is holding Russian territory in Kursk Oblast, endeavoring to fix Russian forces away from Kharkiv and maintain leverage in the event of negotiations. The Russian armed forces are endeavoring to evict the Ukrainian armed forces from Russian territory. The piecemeal capture of territory at great cost and the lack of broader or rapid movement on the front line can give the appearance of a lack of any decisive effect. However, Russia's ground campaign has maintained constant attritional pressure on Ukraine throughout the war, causing lost personnel requiring replacement, alongside material and munitions which must be regenerated or replaced for Ukraine. As Russia's mobilization of its industry and population got underway, it has been able to stretch the armed forces of Ukraine across an extended front line, and at the time of writing, Russia has a viable but not assured pathway to achieving its main effort. So today will be the frontline report for the week of February 12th to the 19th of February. It will cover the Velika Novosilka, Kurakhove, Pokrovsk, and Kupyansk fronts. Then I will go into detail on the RUSI report. Now, as I approach the monetization requirements for this channel, please check out my merch store where you can support me with a purchase. And let's get into it.
От термобарических зарядов противника не спасают.
Now, on one hand, there is no visible or specific target for the Russian offensive after they moved beyond Velika Novosilka. On the other hand, they are advancing along a fairly wide 8-kilometer front, and in just a mere 2 weeks, Russian forces not only managed to cross the Velika Novosilka Huliapol road, but also broke through 3 kilometers north towards the village of Brylatsky. To the north, along the road from Velika Novosilka, they completely occupied Novi Komar and advanced another 1.5 kilometers, starting the assault on Novo Ocherudovate. Currently, taking advantage of their numerical superiority, Russian forces are seizing territories where there were no Ukrainian fortifications. Ukrainian sources anticipate that when the Russians arrive at proper fortifications, then it will be clear how determined they are to push forward.
На само наведение пакета на цель уходит где-то секунд 15.
Now, over the past 5 days, Russian troops, having previously concentrated their forces, launched a large-scale offensive along the perimeter of the pocket formed in the former Kurakhove sector. According to Ukrainian sources, in just a single day, the Russian army deployed over 40 armored vehicles. From the south, Russian forces recaptured Zelenivka and advanced into the southern parts of the key garrison village of Constantinople. While some units managed to enter the center of the village repeatedly over several days, Ukrainian sources claim that they were eliminated by the Ukrainian Defense Forces. However, attempts to secure a foothold in the center persist. On the right flank, Russian troops also attempted but failed to break through to Bogatyr, a village likely to become the next target after the Russians fully occupy and clear the fortified areas of Andriivka, Constantinople, and Ulakli. The situation in Ulakli, even admitted by Ukrainian sources, has reached a critical point. Russian forces have not only secured positions in the southern and central parts of the village, but have also severed the road that could have served as a retreat route for Ukrainian troops defending positions near Dachny. As a result, Ukrainian forces now find themselves not only under intense fire, but effectively encircled, requiring a breakout through combat. This marks the second encirclement of Ukrainian units in this sector in recent months. Previously, Ukrainian troops executed a heroic withdrawal from Ospennivka. Now they face a grueling 10-kilometer battle to break through toward Ulakli and, most likely, Constantinople, where they can regroup if the village doesn't fall before then. Meanwhile, Ukrainian sources claim that heavy battles are ongoing on the northern flank of Andriivka and that Russian troops have infiltrated most of the main streets of the village and are constantly expanding their control. Russian sources, however, report that the Russian army is now executing combing operations in both Andriivka and Ulakli after having expelled the Ukrainian army in both settlements. Further, it is admitted by Ukraine that the Russians managed to capture the pocket between Shevchenko and Dachny, and they are close to doing the same between Shevchenko and Andriivka. Additionally, they have advanced beyond Andriivka, both to the north and west, towards Oleksivka, which Ukrainian forces would have retreated to after the complete occupation of Andriivka. Oleksivka borders Bogatyr and will be the next target for Russia. Bogatyr and Oleksivka are the last villages Russian troops need to capture in order to close the issue with the Kurakhove sector, straighten the front line from Velika Novosilka to the border of the Dnipropetrovsk region, and redirect significant resources to other front sections, i.e. Pokrovsk, Toretsk, Chasiv Yar, or to Kharkiv or Kursk regions. As it stands, the Russians have already reversed all of the progress that the Ukrainian armed forces made in the 2023 counteroffensive near the Bakhmut front. At the same time, the Ukrainian armed forces are conducting stabilization operations both in Ulakli and Andriivka to prevent the complete encirclement of Ukrainian troops and leave them the hopeful opportunity to break out of the fire trap. Despite all attempts by several attacks along the entire 20-kilometer stretch of the front from Udachny to Slovyanka, the Russians have made little progress here. To the north, the Ukrainian armed forces hold their defense in Udachny and Ospennivka, according to Ukrainian sources, and in the center, they prevented any breakthrough to Nadivka. However, Russian forces managed to fully occupy Srebny and take control of the area between the villages of Zaporizhia and Preobrazenka. Russian troops are also trying to bypass Preobrazenka from the north to encircle the Ukrainian defense forces and strike the flank of the Ukrainian defenders in Zaporizhia. However, this plan has been in progress for almost a month. Ukrainian sources claim that there has been a slowdown in the Russian advance towards the Dnipro region.
В принципе, вот и все, что осталось от дрона.
While Russian forces concentrated all their efforts on the Kurakhove sector, they have made little progress to advance on Pokrovsk this past week. As a result, for the first time in a long while, no territory was captured in the Pokrovsk sector over the past week. During this period, Russian troops focused on expanding their control along the Pokrovsk-Constantynivka road, which they had previously severed. However, their progress was limited to increasing the area of active fighting, not toward Pokrovsk, but rather toward Constantynivka. On the right flank, occupying Russian forces were able to recapture Pishani and extended their control in the Kotliny area. Given that Russian troops have reached the road leading to Constantynivka from the southwest, captured Toretsk, and made notable progress in Chasiv Yar, it is likely that this has been enough for the Russian command to start planning an offensive on Constantynivka. This is supported by the fact that the 8th Combined Arms Army of the Russian Armed Forces has been moved from Kurakhove sector, not towards Pokrovsk, but towards Toretsk. Specifically, between Toretsk and Pokrovsk, in the areas of Keramik and Alexandropil, where the front had been stagnant for half a year. From here, another direct road leads to Constantynivka. Despite stability along most of the front between Kharkiv and Luhansk regions, Russian troops seem to have found a weak point in the Ukrainian defense and have been pressing on it for over a month. This concerns the right bank of the Oskil River near Vorochna. Here, Russian troops have been gradually expanding their control by uniting previously separated footholds. Over the past week, they captured territory between the villages of Novominsk and Tiholivka, where battles are currently ongoing. However, Russian troops have not been able to advance in Vorochna, which they control by 80% according to Ukrainian sources. The more significant threat lies in the attacks along the banks of the Oskil River to the south. On the left bank, they are only 2 kilometers from Kupyansk, and from the right bank, they have advanced to within 5 kilometers and continue their offensive. It is likely that with better weather conditions, Russian forces will resume their active advance on Kupyansk, which is already preparing for a circular defense. Now let's take a look at the deep dive analysis from RUSI, the UK-based think tank, which does a very good assessment on the comparative manpower differences between the two armies, as well as the tactics that the Russian army has used to succeed in their attritional warfare in this third year of the Russo-Ukrainian conflict. I will be reading directly from RUSI. The Russian operational group of forces attacking Ukraine currently consists of approximately 580,000 troops. Approximately 70,000 of these are fighting in Kursk Oblast, augmented by approximately 10,000 North Korean soldiers, with more DPRK units likely to arrive before May 2025. A further 80,000 troops are currently operating on the Kharkiv axis, endeavoring to expand the bridgehead over the Oskil River. The largest grouping of Russian forces is in Donetsk and Luhansk Oblasts, comprising some 230,000 troops, advancing on a broad front with the immediate aim of isolating and then reducing Pokrovsk and attacking Constantinople and Kramatorsk over the course of 2025. To the south, Russian forces have seized Velika Novosilka and are likely to continue to slowly advance towards the border of the Dnipro Oblast, bypassing the Ukrainian southern defense line. Should the Ukrainian salient in Kursk be withdrawn, it is likely that Russian armed forces will divert capacity to expand its efforts to threaten Kharkiv Oblast. The Russian armed forces also maintain a grouping of forces in southern Ukraine of approximately 140,000 troops. At present, this group of forces is holding the line of contact on the southern front, with most of its efforts focused on garrisoning Crimea and fixing Ukrainian forces in Kherson and Zaporizhia through strikes and a latent threat against Ukrainian shipping in Kherson and Mykolaiv. There are regular strikes across the Dnipro River and intermittent attempts to cross in small groups, though the size of the force does not threaten a larger operation at this stage. The effect is to fix Ukrainian forces. The Russian armed forces are also continuing to conduct widespread and regular long-range strikes on Ukrainian training bases, airfields, and critical national infrastructure. This campaign involves a combination of daily strikes using Zheran-2 and Gerbera UAVs and periodic ballistic and cruise missile salvos. The campaign inflicts persistent damage but is highly unlikely to prove decisive this winter. Its greatest military impact is fixing Ukrainian air defense across the country and depleting Ukrainian and NATO air defense interceptor stockpiles. To ensure the Russian armed forces can continue these efforts, Russia contracted more than 400,000 additional troops in 2024, enabling the expansion of its forces despite a fairly high rate of casualties. Russia is anticipated to reduce its recruitment targets for 2025, but is still expected to recruit more personnel than it loses over this period. Russian forces were often suffering more than 200 personnel killed per day during 2024, with over 1,200 casualties per day towards the end of the year. A significant proportion of wounded, however, are returned to service. Russia is also significantly increasing the production of ammunition and the key classes of equipment, with over 70,000 unified gliding and correction modules, glide bombs, ordered for 2025. However, a large proportion of ammunition for artillery is currently procured from North Korea and, according to RUSI, is of a low quality. Russia is also likely to face reduced availability of armored vehicles over 2025 as it depletes stores of old vehicles and must depend on newly produced platforms to replace losses. The primary tactical problems for the Russian armed forces imposes on the Ukrainian armed forces, however, will be unaffected by these considerations, as will be discussed later in the paper. The armed forces of Ukraine continue to have to defend the entire 1,200-kilometer line of contact. Although the Ukrainian Defense Forces, including police, border guards, and other security functions, comprise some 800,000 personnel, most of these are fixed on tasks separate from combat operations. The available combat power of the armed forces of Ukraine comprises less than 25% of the force. The need to defend such a broad front means that although in aggregate the force ratio between the armed forces of Ukraine and Russian operational group of forces is favorable, the actual force ratio between combat units in any given sector is between 1 to 2 and 1 to 6. This is because the Russian operational group of forces does not include the security and whole support structure for the Russian armed forces, so a higher proportion consists of combat troops. In many sectors, the greatest challenge for the armed forces of Ukraine is the shortage of combat troops. Although Ukraine is suffering heavy casualties, it does have reserves of manpower that can address this challenge. The biggest problems in achieving this, aside from equipment and armament shortages, are training, personal management, and morale among troops who have been engaged in heavy fighting for 3 years and perceive a deteriorating tactical situation.
Давай! Давай! Быстрее!